Hello and welcome to the Health Data Ethics Podcast. I am so excited today to have an interview with my friend Doug Meil. Doug is my friend and a frequent author on tech topics. I always leave our conversations feeling smarter and like I have more homework and research to do. I cannot wait to talk with you about your book that's coming out. Before we dive in, anything you want to add to your introduction?
No, Doug Meil. I'm a software and a data guy. I've been in multiple industries over the last 30 years, and I was the founding engineer of Explorys, acquired by IBM in 2015, and I was there through 2018, and I left in 2019. So the book represents about a 10-year period of my life.
Yeah. And the book is coming out on September 22nd, which is a week from our recording date. This is very exciting. It's called The Rise and Fall of Explorys and IBM Watson Health. I will absolutely drop a link to order it in the show notes and on LinkedIn and YouTube so that we can drum up some business for you because I'm really excited to hear this. Give me a little intro about the book.
So, like I said, the book represents about 10 years of my life, and there's the Explorys side, which is the realities of not just a startup in general, but a startup in the healthcare sector, which is a challenge. And then there's the Watson Health side, covering also the context of what was happening with IBM and the twins, which is IBM was going through some turbulent times back then, as well as also the long shadow of the Jeopardy project, which was a fascinating project, and then its ambitions and self-described moonshot in healthcare, which started 2015 with the inception of Watson Health.
So Doug, tell me about why you're writing this book, and tell me about why you're writing this book now.
A great question, Jenny. So a lot was written about Watson Health in the formation in 2010. And, again, like it was a self-described moonshot for IBM. A lot was written in the decline and then the implosion of 2018. A writer from the IEEE spectrum named Eliza Strickland, who I think really nailed it in her articles in 2018 and 2019, where she stepped back and really described the unfortunate crater that was IBM Watson Health. I mean, how did this happen? It doesn't seem possible to in 3 years go from something where it's being just called a moonshot, we're going to revolutionize healthcare, to, well, we just lost $5 or $6 billion or whatever the exact amount is, and we're selling off the charred remains of the division, and it didn't make any sense, especially given the fact that IBM Watson Health was seeded with multiple acquisitions. So there was Explorys and Phytel, which were acquired in April of 2015. A company called Merge Healthcare was acquired in the fall of 2015 that did primarily radiology and diagnostics and things like that. Proven was acquired, primarily known for claims analytics, in April of the spring of 2016. And then there were also the assets from a company called Curum, which did social services software that had been acquired several years earlier. IBM had plans for something like Watson Health, and so that was an acquisition that was set up years in advance to prime that pump. Plus Watson for Oncology, which also predated Watson Health, that was moved into the division, and several other research assets. So there was, and again, you can't forget about Jeopardy and Watson, because the strategic intention was to power all of that with Watson's AI. So you had a lot of data, you had expertise, you had a lot of products, and it seemed, this wasn't going to be easy, but it seemed like it was a strong bet that IBM was going to come out with something. And unfortunately, it did not. And so one of the reasons why, that Watson Health failed is clear, but even Eliza Strickland's IEEE articles were covering primarily things like Watson for Oncology and some other of the higher profile project issues, which were separate from the acquisitions. And so one of the things that bothered me as somebody that spent a decade of their life in this story is, well, no one was really telling the acquisition story, if that makes sense. That inspired me to write an article for the Association for Computing Machinery called What Happened to Watson Health. I had started hobby writing for the ACM back in the beginning of 2021. That article got a lot of press, and people started asking me, so when's the book coming out? And maybe they were like 49% kidding, or maybe 51% kidding, but it was enough where it was like, you get that jab a couple of times, and then you start wondering, like, well, maybe I could. And then when a former college professor said to me, so when's the book coming out? that was it. Like and again, T.M. Rajkumar from a retired professor from Miami University. When he said that to me, I was like, okay, I got to try. Then I had to take the next step on how to learn how to write a book. Which is, it's not easy. It is, and fortunately, I'd been stalling for a couple of years. By 2023, I had enough people saying, "So when's the book coming out? When's the book coming out?" By then, I had done around 20 or so articles for the ACM, and I had enough confidence now as a writer to say, like, I think I might be able to try this, but I still don't know how to get to a book. And I was fortunate to know another person, a guy I know that's written a half dozen books, and on a variety of topics, martial arts and some other things. And so I was asking him, how do you write a book? Mm-hmm. And I said, I feel like I know how to do essays. How do I go from essay to book? And he said, it was in 90 minutes that were invaluable. He said, an essay is like a shed. It can be a nice shed. You can have a concrete floor. You can run power out to it. A book is not just more, a book is like a house. It needs a different architecture. A book is not just more shed. So you need to think about this from, like, how do I go from room to room, and which rooms will there be, and to make sure that you don't have a room that you can't get to. So, and all of that, and so he was influential in terms of helping me organize the story. And so again, kudos to Scott Burr for that. So it's always helpful to have a serious writer as a friend.
For sure.
And so and then after that, went through a pitch phase. Happened to get a publisher that not just agreed to take me on, but agreed to take me on in the way that I wanted to tell the story. Mm-hmm. I knew that I wanted this to be a memoir, so this had to be in the first person for me to tell the story. I'm not going to pretend I'm not biased. I lived it, but it needed to at least be in my style and defensible, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And entertaining. I wanted it to be a good story.
Yeah.
I wanted people to read it and learn something from it. So yeah, that was that's the highlight of Watson Health, and then also how we got to the book.
I love this. So I want to take you back a little bit, because during the time period you're describing, I had just sort of exited my cocoon of academia and started working at the clinic. And so some of this I remember, and some of this I was oblivious to. I was wondering if you could give me a brief history of Explorys, the company, because I came of age at the clinic in a time when it was referenced, but I don't really think I ever got the origin story.
Totally. Explorys. So in order to Explorys was formally founded in the fall of 2009. It was on paper a Cleveland Clinic Innovations company. So what was being commercialized was something called e-research, and then with the e-research came access to the Cleveland Clinic data, and that was a first for the clinic. The clinic had never actually done an IP deal. So I think that was only the second or third IP deal with software that the clinic had ever done. They'd previously all been medical devices, not, no surprise there. So it was an early software deal, and it was the first software deal that included data access. And so stepping back from that, the two founders of Explorys, Charlie Lougheed and Steve McHale, and I worked together for years at Everstream. And so it's also impossible to tell the Explorys story without the Everstream story, because many of the technical patterns and anti-patterns that were learned during 5.5 years of Everstream during a video on demand distributed data collection and reporting were utilized in Explorys. And so that heavily influenced the technical architecture of Explorys. And so we started with the clinic, and the first solution was something called the Population Explorer. It was a population search tool. And one of the things that was, I think, important for Explorys, like what made Explorys distinctive, we were at the fall of 2009 AMIA, 2009 as just attendees. So we had just formed the company. We went there basically just learning. So things like SNOMED, norm. Explorers didn't invent these things. These things have been around for a long time. I mean, the LINC was invented at Regenstrief in Indiana in like 1995, and SNOMED had been around since the 80s, or at least versions of SNOMED. And in air quotes, real people in healthcare at that point, they basically only did CPT and ICD reporting, like specifically ICD-9. So that's what real analytics looked like back then. SNOMED, ArcSnorm, standard ontologies were really only used for research, and they didn't really have any commercial applications. Does that make sense? And so this is also, 2009 is also years before meaningful use. Nobody was really thinking about, I mean, few people, I won't say nobody, but few people were really thinking about commercial products using those standard ontologies. And so that, I think, was a big breakthrough for Explorys, is we were always thinking about secondary use in a massive data set. And the only way to do that and have it make sense across hospital systems was standard ontologies. And so we were I'm not going to say we were the first, but I think we were one of the biggest implementations and earliest implementations utilizing those frameworks. And it was all backed by, we made a huge bet on the Hadoop ecosystem backstopping our technical infrastructure. We were lucky in catching that wave too. So we caught a couple of like any startup, you get a couple of lucky breaks that are not of your own choosing. And one was, we chose wisely on the healthcare ontologies before, we had years of experience before anybody else was in there. And then the big data wave, we caught that pretty early. Not bleeding edge early, but still it was leading edge. I mean, it started 2006, 2007 in Silicon Valley. And I mean, for a company in Cleveland, doing Hadoop in 2009, yeah, we were way out there. People were wondering, like, who are you? Like, what do you do? And so, we caught a couple of good breaks and then rode that.
This is fantastic. And I do remember the glory days of Hadoop at Cleveland Clinic. Those were fun. So you mentioned that at the time, IBM Watson Health was acquiring a bunch of companies. Talk to me a little bit about the history of IBM acquisition. How did the acquisition of Explorys and related companies fit into the overall state of IBM at the time?
So that's a great question. If I could back up just a little bit with IBM in that decade, the 2010s were a tough decade for IBM. It was an entire decade of slow deflation, quarter over quarter results. Just, you can look at the headlines and it was like IBM revenues are down, IBM revenues are down, IBM revenues are down. And I think only 1 year IBM actually had revenues that were up, and it was like by 1%. This is not what you expect from a tech company. Mm-hmm. And so IBM was going through a very real existential crisis of, like, who are we? We used to run, I mean, IBM was synonymous with the tech industry and computers, and, like, what do we do anymore? And I'd like to say, just make it clear, like, I've been an IBM fan for a long time. Like, I read IBM Red books by the yard back in the 90s. I have an autographed CICS songbook by Ben Riggins, who was the creator of the CICS, if you're familiar with the transaction processing system. So you may be aware that IBM used to have songbooks. You may not be aware that IBM actually had product-specific songbooks.
I did not know that.
And so I have one. And so, like, the IBM was they were a big early adopter of Java back in the day. They put Java interfaces on their key products. So again, I've been a fan of IBM for a long time. But unfortunately, when Explorys was forming in 2009, in the beginning of that decade, IBM really was nowhere to be seen in the big data space. They still pretty much kind of stuck to their enterprise contracts, and there was a lot of concern within the company of, like, are they going to wind up like Sun, right? I mean, Sun Microsystems was the hottest thing in the 90s. In the late 90s, and then they got swallowed up in our footnote a decade later. So, what will IBM be? And then that kind of existential crisis can make people angsty, right? It can make people nervous. It can make people maybe not make the best decisions, make rush decisions. And then they get a little bit lucky with research with Jeopardy, right? And again, I'm a Jeopardy fan. I have stood behind the Jeopardy set and had my picture taken, so I'm a huge fan. I'm a fan of that too.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But I think that IBM didn't necessarily learn the lessons of Jeopardy, and here's why. So in a meetup that I used to run for 14 years, I had one of the systems engineers for Jeopardy come and talk in the fall of 2015. Now, granted, this is 4 some years afterwards, but the story that he was telling of how Jeopardy happened, it took multiple years. They took a lot of functional tuning to get the accuracy from 90 to 95. That takes a lot of time, and that makes sense to somebody that has a software engineer with a product focus, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like the first time they ran the question and answer engine, it ran for like 24 hours. Again, they were like, don't worry, this is running on a single machine. And eventually it was deployed on a 90 machine cluster. Lots of tuning. They had to write software for the betting in the game. They had to write software for the clicker. So this is something that was purpose built. And where I'm going with this is, even the systems engineer, even after all that effort, he says, on the day when Alex Trebek was in the house, he goes, I gave a 75% chance to win. That is not what somebody from marketing would tell you. Now, again, if they're playing best 3 out of 5, best 4 out of 7, like, the odds are Watson's probably going to win. But even he was pointing out, like, it took a lot of time for us to get to that point. And he goes, there were several points in that game where we kind of lost, but we didn't. And it was a big marketing thing, but like, everybody forgot the hard work. Everybody kind of like they learned the wrong lesson.
The cultural impact of that moment, I really feel like cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like it was very much like a John Henry, the machine was there and it was successful, and all that work, like IT work usually is, right, was invisible underneath the success.
And exactly, and it created, and again, I'm a fan of that effort.
Oh yeah.
But people think the rest, I think, or at least the leadership, they got hung up on the magic. And they forgot that, we spent a long time building a Jeopardy playing machine that is amazing, but when you go into the next industry, what are your expectations? And so then when you combine the Jeopardy experience, now backing up with the rough decade, unfortunately the expectations came where everybody wanted everything now. Mm-hmm. So everybody was looking for I want billions of revenue now, and not just revenue, and it has to be profitable, and that's a whole other problem. It's one thing generating revenue, it's another thing doing it profitably, and that takes time to tune. And we can go into any industry, and so a lot of promises are made, a lot of hype was, and these are my words. Just go look at the time, and so that unfortunately fed into the expectations for Watson Health, and I don't fault IBM for trying healthcare. I think it was still worth a shot. It's just, unfortunately, it came in. It was attempted at a company that wanted too much too soon and forgot the lessons of, no, this is actually going to take a couple of years, and it's going to take a lot of hard work. And then the irony of buying companies, right? I mean, people forget YouTube was an acquisition from Google. Microsoft bought Visio, Microsoft bought PowerPoint. It's easy to forget that. So acquisitions can work, but the integration of those acquisitions, of those inorganic acquisitions, actually takes organic thinking and skills, and that's what everybody forgets, is that it's not just about the acquisition is the beginning of your problems. It's not I have a very long intro to your question, but
no, this is great.
That's the setup.
Because what I want to ask you is, well, then what happened? But then I'm also very conscious that this is the crux of your book. So perhaps I won't ask you what happened, and I'll instead tell people to buy your book so that they can hear you and read your entire writing through the entire thing. I can't wait for this book to come out. I feel like we could spend so much time discussing all of the intricacies of this, because this is such a fascinating time in health tech in general, and for these two companies and this particular space in particular. What a unique microcosm of both the opportunities and some of the confusion of health tech at the time. Yep.
And not just health tech at the time, but I don't think that IBM Watson Health is unique in time. There'll be another one, but it was definitely unique for its time. Mm-hmm. But I don't think.
Yeah. So I want to close with a question. Actually, two questions. One, because it is so easy to chat with you for such a long time, I'm going to ask, please come back on the podcast. There are about 16 follow-up questions that I want to talk with you about. So please.
Happy to.
Secondly, if we can extract a advice or learning from this, if I'm a young inventor with some intellectual property under my belt and I'm looking at a brave new world full of artificial intelligence and healthcare and the field seems ripe for innovation, what would you tell me?
Oh, wow. I feel like it's a podcast right there. That's like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So the velocity is life in development. I mean, iterate, iterate, iterate. That one's a given. You've got to take care of your customers, otherwise someone else will take care of them for you, and it won't be it will. With healthcare in particular, data access is huge. I mean, everybody can develop it's one thing to develop a product on fake data or general data. It's something else to build a product that supports real data. And so that is a chasm. That's not just an incremental step. So
I feel like that is the next book that I would cheerfully read, which is how to make the jump from working with publicly accessible data
yep.
to real data at a customer site. I think that would be fascinating. Doug, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking time out to chat. I truly, truly appreciate you and your efforts. Buy Doug's book, everybody. It's going to be really good. It's called The Rise and Fall of Explorys and IBM Watson Health. It's released September 22nd. Doug, anything else you want to say to people before we stop recording?
Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Thank you so much.